Hi everyone, my name is Matt and welcome to my channel. We've had a few requests for a video about painting white Space Marine armor. White can be challenging to paint, but with the right tricks and a little practice you can get some great looking results. So let's grab our brushes and get started. First we need to mix a very light gray, similar to gray number 8 from my Custom Greyscale. You can learn all about mixing your own set in this video here. To give you an idea of how light this gray is, if we compare gray cere against the chart, it falls between 6 and 7. Alternatively, you could make a mix of about 2 parts white to 1 part gray cere. After undercoating my model with gray primer, I airbrushed it with a few layers of gray number 8. I'd really recommend an airbrush for this step. It's essential for getting a smooth, bright finish. Keep layers thin and build them up slowly for the smoothest result. One of the challenges with painting white is we can only shade it. White is as light as it goes, and we can't highlight it further. The secret is to use a light gray instead. In the end, what we want is a shade of gray that's really close to white, but not quite there. That way the model looks white, but we still have a little bit of room for a highlight on the edges with pure white. I want to start shading the armor with a subtle, soft shade. I made a mix of 2 parts contrast medium to 1 part apothecary white and painted over the armor. When working with contrast paints, I like to paint one section at a time and use plenty of paint so it flows into all the recesses. Then use the brush to soak up any excess paint after. Contrast paint is all about controlling where the paint flows and pools. Areas where more paint collects will be darker, and areas with less paint will be lighter. Before I paint each section, I try to think about where I want to direct the paint, and I'll end my brush stroke in that section. I also like to go back with a clean brush and wipe away some paint from the light section. Try to keep this shade layer as smooth and as even as possible. If you do this correctly, you should get a smooth gradation starting with the pure base coat color at the top, blending to a light bluish gray at the bottom. With the soft shading done, now it's time to add a deep shadow in the cracks. I want this armor to have a bluish tone, so I'm using Russ gray, thinned slightly with water. You could use a different medium gray if you like, such as Dawnstone for a neutral look, or Stormvermin fur for a warmer tone. Use the sharpest brush you have and carefully paint a narrow line directly in each crevice. If the line is a little crooked, or if you make any mistakes, that's okay, they'll be easy to correct later. Now is a great time for me to ask you to do those YouTube things that we all love so much. If you're liking the video so far, please give it a like. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future content. If you really like what I'm doing here and want to support the channel further, consider being a channel member. We have some perks including a Discord server and early access to videos. At this stage I like to use black paint to outline everything else where it meets up with the armor. My reasoning is that if I make a mistake, it's a lot easier to correct right now, compared to making a mistake after the white is finished. I think that the most difficult thing about painting white isn't actually the white part, it's painting everything else as carefully as possible without messing up. I went ahead and painted everything else black for now because I think it will make things easier to see on camera. Next I went back to the base coat color, gray number 8, and I painted a thin glaze on the upward facing areas. Think about the gradient from the first shade step, and let that tell you where to place your highlights. You may need more or less glazing depending on how heavy the initial contrast shade was, and depending on how much paint you soaked up to make the initial gradations. I also cleaned up any edges where the black paint looked too heavy or uneven. All that's left is to highlight with pure white, but I think it's a better idea to paint the rest of the model first and save the white highlights for the very end. Mistakes are bound to happen when painting everything else, and the armor will be much easier to fix in the state it's in now. So, with the magic of technology, let's jump ahead in time and finish the armor. With everything else on the model finished, now we can add the final touches to the armor. I used my sharpest brush and painted all the edges with white, thinned slightly with water. White paint tends to dry quickly, so make sure to clean your brush frequently. A good, opaque white paint is really important, and there are lots of different manufacturers out there to choose from. Personally, I like Vallejo Game Color White, but I'd encourage you to try out a few different brands and see what you like the most. On some of the large panels and rounded areas, I like to add a glaze of white. Thin down the white paint with 2 or 3 parts water, and with barely any paint on the brush, paint it wherever you'd like to lighten the armor. The brush will leave a little extra paint when you lift it off the model, so I like to move the brush upwards and end the stroke near the top. Normally I prefer a clean, polished look for white, but if you want to add some weathering, you can paint some very thin glazes of a warm gray like Stormvermin fur. Thin the paint with a lot of water, maybe 4 parts water to 1 part paint, and with barely any paint on the brush, slowly build up some layers. You can paint a few scratches and spots too if you like. I think it's easy to overdo the weathering, so I'd recommend starting with a small area first. You can always add more, but if you add too much, it'll be difficult to correct. I'd like to give a big shout out to our channel members. Thank you so much for your support. It really is a huge help. If you want to be like these amazing people and help support what I'm doing here, just click the join button down below. Thank you. I think the most difficult thing about painting white is keeping it clean while painting everything else. One wrong move with the brush and you can make a mistake that'll take a long time to fix. And make sure your hands are really clean to avoid any stains or fingerprints on the model. I think painting in sub-assembly makes it easier to paint the other details, and saving the white highlights for the end makes the armor a little easier to fix if you make any mistakes while painting the rest of the model. Do you have any tips for painting white? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and until next time, happy painting!